Good morning.
Good morning.
You're on.
All right. Hey, thanks for coming in today. Welcome to Greenleaf Gardening, Organics, and Hydroponics. We're putting on a class on pesticide use, mostly focusing on insects, outdoors and indoors, both sprays, drenches, cultural controls, monitoring, everything we can think of to ensure your ultimate success. My name's Marvin. This is David. We work together on this presentation. So we'll talk a little bit about ID to start things off with. You got to know what you're looking for. There's all different kinds of problems that can happen with plants. Some of it has to do with nutrition, some of it has to do with weather, and then some of it has to do with insects. So you got to look for those telltale clues to cue you in on what problems you might have, and if you even have an insect problem or not. A really good example is insect frass, which is poop. You look for that for your caterpillars, for instance. You'll see that. They look like little black grains of sand that are among your leaves and your flowers. And sure enough, you follow that trail, you're probably going to be finding either a caterpillar burrowed into your fruits, or hopefully a dead caterpillar that you've sprayed already with some BT. Another thing to be looking for, to be monitoring for, is ants. Ants are notorious for farming aphids and mealing bugs, literally placing them throughout your plant and using the juice that they extract from the plant for their own food. So that will ants will disrupt possible beneficial insects that are there to eat the aphids. They'll scare them off. So try not to confuse any kind of insect damage with the nutrient deficiencies or heat or light burn or underwatering. You got to realize that some insects have piercing, sucking mouthpieces, so they'll make more of like a pointy, leave more of a damage that's a kind of a point. Whereas there's other insects that chew, such as caterpillars, and with those you'll be looking for more, a chewed up surface of the leaf, more of a hole. Same thing with snails and slugs. As far as your monitoring goes, different insects have different personalities as far as where they like to hide, what time of year they're going to start surfacing. Caterpillars, you'll find those most active are at night. So you'd want to use a green light as to not disrupt the light cycle of your plants, and look for them then. They'll be often burrowed into flowers or fruits, but literally you can pick them off with your hands. And the more you pick off, that means the less you have to spray your plant, the less likely they are to keep breeding on your plant, and so on and so forth. Spider mites, you'll find those on the undersides of the leaves. You'll see little eggs, you'll see the spider mites themselves crawling. You can see indications of the spider mites usually are on the top of the leaves. They're called stipules, and that's the damage that the spider mite has left. And it's showing through onto the top of the leaf. They look like a tiny little needle point.
Little speck.
A little speck, and kind of yellowish, brownish colored. And overall, over time, as this increases, you have a larger infestation. The leaf itself will sort of bronze out and kind of get like a ratty, bronzed look. And at that point, real easy to tell visually even from a distance that you have spider mite infestation. And once your leaves are damaged, I shoot for if it's damaged halfway, if you have half of your leaf gone or half of it looks like it's been damaged by any kind of insect, at that point I'm removing that leaf, and as to curb any further infestation onto the other parts of the plants. So one thing to look for, one thing that will help you in your looks is a magnifying glass, a microscope, gloves. Oftentimes plants have lots of oils and resins on them that can cause allergic reactions on your skin, or if you've been spraying pesticides, there's residues that can be on there that can affect your hands. So it's better to keep yourself protected. Wear some gloves. The magnifying glass can help you spot insects that you might have trouble identifying, smaller ones. Aphids are a little bit larger than spider mites, but sometimes to the untrained eye, it might take a closer look to have a see at what you're looking at. So inside, most of the insect problems that people run into are with fungus gnats, and that's especially early on. And then spider mites. Spider mites tend to be the biggest problem, leaving the most damage. They're the most hard to eradicate, and tend to, they breed like crazy. So a small infestation on one leaf, on one plant, can turn into your whole garden being infested, and you'll have cobwebs, and it really at that point is affecting your yield and your quality of your garden. So definitely something to keep in mind. Outdoors, there's more insects to have to deal with. They've got caterpillars, you have aphids, whiteflies, all types of insects. There's also thrips that you can run into. Those are kind of like aphids or whiteflies, but they tend to also bite your skin and leave a little bit of a painful little bite. Also, there's snails and slugs that you can run into outside. But with all that said, there's also beneficial insects that you run into. So those guys are helping you along the way, such as ladybugs, predatory mites, praying mantises. So those are all things that you want to encourage to be living in your garden. And the best way to do that is to have multiple types of plants, multiple types of flowers to attract pollinators, to attract different varieties of insects. And having that multiple variety will help ensure balanced populations of pests. So,
Okay, round one. I know which one she wants.
there's different levels of methods of management control. There's cultural control. That's basically your own personal input. Your hands. Prevention is the key. You want to keep your grow room clean. You got to have clean tools. If possible, keep outside visitors to a minimum. They can be tracking in insects of their own on their clothes, in their hair, on their hands, on their shoes. Same thing with pets. Dogs, cats. They can get into things outside and then transfer pests, and also fungus and other diseases can be transferred inside into your garden. Carpet is one of those big no-nos indoors, as far as can be a great breeding ground for different insects, and also hold on to moisture, which can cause fungus problems. Proper ventilation will definitely help you avoid certain insect problems indoors. You want to maintain ideal climate, your temperatures, fresh air, all those things, providing for your plant, to make it grow as good as possible. Well, then you'll have a healthy plant that can help fight off and be more resistant to pests and diseases. One thing that I wanted to touch about is the disease triangle. That's another way of just being aware that there's different factors that can lead to an infestation. You have your host, you have your pathogen or your insect, and you have your environment. And all those have to be in the right series in order for you to have an infestation. So you got an environment that isn't ideal, and you have your host there and your pathogen, you're going to have an infestation. So all three of those things work together to cause problems for you. So you have to keep those things in mind. Weakened plants are key targets for insects. So insects, a lot of them are attracted to yellow. That's why we have the yellow sticky cards. But most dying plants that are sick, take on a yellow color, and insects are naturally attracted to that. So that's why you want to keep your plants healthy and green, because they won't be attracted to it as much. That's another reason why you also want to remove any dying plant material, any leaf litter, any kind of trash that the insects can overwinter in or find a temporary home on until they get onto your next plant. There's also biological controls. Insects, predatory insects such as ladybugs and predatory mites, the praying mantis, also spiders, regular spiders can help catch flies and other insects in your indoors and outdoors. There's also microorganisms, microbial beneficials such as trichoderma species. Those are found in the great white shark inoculants, as well as other There's other products such as Voodoo Juice, Piranha, and Tarantula. Those are by Advanced Nutrients. Also, there's Bacillus thuringiensis kerstaki, which is a short name for BT. BT is used for caterpillars. That is a bacteria that's considered organic, comes naturally in the environment, and that BT, when sprayed onto your plants and ingested by the caterpillars, will disrupt their digestive tract and essentially kill them from the inside. So that's what I use for caterpillar control, and I've had great success with it. There's also additives that you can use in your pesticide sprays. One of them, a big one that I definitely recommend, is silica. Silica is a great additive. It will strengthen your cell wall and help protect against insect damage and drought, as well as temperature swings. So that's a great one to use, especially if you're indoors and have heat control issues, especially during the summertime. If you don't have an air conditioner and you need something to allow your plant to keep growing even at higher temperatures, the silica is an excellent choice. You can add that into your foliar spray, which I prefer to using instead of a soil drench. You use it as your foliar spray. It won't change the pH of your growing media as much. Silica is known for being very basic. Some people use it as pH up. So in order to keep your media in the mid to low 6s, like I like for my soil, I just circumvent all that and use it as a foliar spray. Also, Protect Silica, which we have, and there's other silica products on the market, but this is the one that I like to use. Protect Silica has the silica, it has the potassium. It's a potassium silicate based product. Most of them are. So that potassium and the silica that you're adding onto your plant are helping in both ways. But also, this Protect has a surfactant kind of built into it. So Dynagrow, which makes this product, they actually recommend that you use neem oil, which we'll talk about later, and this Protect as a surfactant and just additive for your foliar feed. So what I've been doing recently is I've been using Protect as well as azamax at the same time, and those mix well together nicely. And the Protect helps spread the azamax over the plant leaves, so you get more benefit, more efficient use of your spray. So hand removal, going back to a little bit to cultural control, that's one thing you basically have to do. If you have any kind of larger insect infestations, caterpillars especially, you're going to monitor for those, scout for them, and literally, pull them off with hands, traps, anything you can do. I had a fly, literally a housefly infestation indoors, and I used the yellow sticky cards, and that's what it took to catch those buggers. Another thing you can do is use rubbing alcohol wipes to clean off your leaves. That will clean off any kind of spider mat activity that are on the bottom. It helps clean off the dust and just leave your plant more shiny and more able to absorb and photosynthesize. Moist paper towel wipes on the leaves also is something that I've used quite often with great success, especially in interior plants. You can take a moist paper towel and wipe both sides of the leaves. It goes great on like house plants, and that will wipe off the dust and help prevent spider mites, good conditions for spider mites. So going back to foliar sprays, always use surfactant with your spray for the best results. Most sprays, or quite a few sprays, have a good consistency to them, and they need a emulsifier surfactant to kind of break it up and let it spread over the leaves for optimal distribution and use. The ones that I recommend are Cocoa Wet, Wet Betty, and Saturator. Saturator is by Dutch Master, and Wet Betty is made by Advanced Nutrients. All three of them are roughly the same price per ounce. I found the best success with Saturator. That one has a kind of a wet dish soapy like consistency to it, but just seems to really do the job well. You don't need very much. It's roughly 60 milliliters per quart of solution, so a little bit goes a long way, and it really makes a difference as far as spreading out that azamax and the neem oil or the BT over your plants. I wouldn't be caught not using something like that. Getting on to a little bit about safety, it's always important to read the label on the bottle until you understand the directions clearly. There's a little bit of outside information on the edge of the bottle, but you got to get into the thick of that of the instructions. Usually there's a peel-off label. Oftentimes, if there's additional information that is required by the manufacturer to provide, it is attached and some kind of like a zip tie or a sticker to the rest of the bottle. But you'll find everything that they've provided to be very useful. There's lots of good information about which insects are going to be affected, because not all the insects that are on your plant are ones that are harmful to it, especially outdoors. So there's good insects that are affected and bad as well. So there's things like bees and your ladybugs, and also not just insects but animals and fish and things that you have to be aware of. If you're going to be spraying your plant, you want to make sure that you're keeping things safe for the rest of the environment. You can't be letting it get into the groundwater or the water supply or streams and causing problems for unintended animals and insects. There's also application rates that you'll find on these bottles. Oftentimes there are light, medium, and heavy doses, and you would use those doses depending on what level of infestation you have. There's the timing. Certain pesticides you can only spray at weekly intervals or every 2 weeks. Some of them can be sprayed more often.
Day or night.
Yeah, some of them can be sprayed in the day, some of them absolutely not. So it really is important to pay attention to that kind of thing. There's certain fertilizers that can be added with your foliar spray, but those fertilizers are intended oftentimes to be sprayed in the daylight hours, whereas the pesticide might be reserved for the nighttime hours. So, in theory they might mix, but in practice they don't work together. So a restricted entry interval is another thing that the pesticide will often tell you on the label, and that is essentially just how long you have to wait before you go back into the area. Some of these things, even though they're considered organic, it's not something you want to be breathing in or getting on your skin, and there's a certain usually hours or days even that access is restricted unless you have proper protective clothing. We're talking like respirators and dust masks and things like that. So it really depends on the level of chemical that you're using. Most of the stuff that we carry, pretty gentle, but still you want to be careful. And that leads me to PPE, which is personal protective equipment. Those will always be listed on the pesticide label. Gloves, goggles, real standard. Wear shoes with socks, long sleeve shirt, pants. All those things are real standard. Don't be wearing sandals. A thing that can help you out if you want to take it one step further is aprons. There's different rubber and plastic aprons that can be taken off easily if they were spilled on, but can help keep off any extra spillage or absorption into your personal clothing. Certain pesticides come with signs that you can post notifying people of the restricted entry intervals, such as our foggers. Those are meant to be posted outside of your room or your greenhouse or wherever you're in to keep people safe and keep them out of that area. If you don't have one, oftentimes it'd be beneficial to make one and post it. From personal experience, I know someone that was weeding out a section of lawn that was along the edge of the perimeter of the property line, and their neighbors had sprayed a bunch of weed killer on these plants hours or maybe a day before, and my friend broke out in a really intense rash and allergic reaction because of the exposure to these pesticide residues, and had to go to the hospital. So it's something that could have easily been avoided just by posting a sign or letting people know that to not to get into that area. If you're planning on spraying, especially inside, but keep in mind things like the wind, You don't want your spray drifting onto plants that you don't intend to spray, and you don't want these sprays blowing back onto you and getting into your skin or into your lungs or your eyes. So be sure to turn off your oscillating fans and your ventilation system if you plan on spraying indoors, and pay even closer attention to your protective equipment when spraying inside, because if you're in a small environment, oftentimes those fumes can build up and can cause problems in your breathing. Sprays can be mixed into warmer water. Certain things like neem oil, the more oil-based sprays, warm water will help dissolve those ingredients. You also definitely want to make sure your sprayer mixer is agitated while you're spraying, so your solution stays mixed. You want to make sure it's pressurized, but keep swirling it around. Let that stuff keep mixed up in your spray, because you want it to be properly mixed and have a proper application rate. Before spraying your entire garden, it's beneficial. It's in your best interest to do a spot test on the plants you decide on spraying. Certain plants are more sensitive to sprays than other. For instance, cacti and succulents definitely aren't as forgiving when sprayed with any kind of with most pesticides. They just don't. Their tissue of their skin is harmed, it's bleached, it's rotted out sometimes. I've had all these problems before, so I've relegated myself to using soil drenches with my cacti and succulents. This is just an example. But another one would be, we sprayed a perthrin spray on our tomatoes, and it showed a little bit of a burn. So we decided that in the future we would use one that's a little bit less concentrated. As far as tank mixes go, there are things that you can mix together. Certain insecticides mixed with fertilizers, or certain insecticides mixed with other ones, so you can get a more broad range of control for your plants. Be sure to follow both labels. You have to defer to the greater time interval. If you're spraying two insecticides, for instance, BT and azamax, which I mix together. BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, I use that for caterpillar control. I use azamax for prevention control of mites and whiteflies and aphids and a little bit of powdery mildew. But BT is made to be sprayed more often than azamax, and can be sprayed more often. Whereas azamax, they really recommend no more than once a week. So when I mix those together, I spray it once a week, because if I sprayed it as often as I could with the BT, I'd be overdoing it with the azamax and causing burn problems. Or if you use too much of something, you can kill off any kind of beneficial insects. Or if you use too less,
your product.
You can contaminate your product. Exactly. You don't want to be using too much of anything and leaving it, having that residue stay on there longer than you intended. Or when you come to spray the next time, you're overdoing it. So these are all things that you want to keep really accurate. You can mix neem oil with the silica. I found that neem is just real hard to keep mixed up even with surfactants. I am gradually moving towards using azamax, even though they're similar products. Azamax is a more concentrated version. Doesn't have quite all the hidden ingredients per se, but they have very similar modes of action. Also, be sure to adjust your pesticide solution to the mid to low sixes, the pH of your solution, unless it states otherwise. Some products say not to adjust your pH solution at all. But just like with your nutrients, maximum absorption occurs in the mid to low 6 range. So that seems to be a good number. Some more on safety. It's good to use gloves, goggles, protective clothing, shoes. It's good to have good access to close access to water, whether you're out on a field or at home. In case something bad happens and you need to rinse out your eyes or wash yourself off, it's good to have water nearby. Either a bottle of water or a hose spigot will be fine. But if you have to wash out your eyes, it's better not to have to. It's better to have that available right away.
And if you're thirsty.
Yeah, and if you're thirsty. if you get any pesticide on you, always wash your protective clothing in hot soapy water without any other clothes in the washer or dryer. Okay, this is ideal. And this way, you're not spreading any kind of pesticide onto other clothes. And then the next step would be to run your washer again without any clothes in it, but with just hot soapy water. And that will clean out the washer machine, not leave any residues inside the washer machine that can contaminate other clothes later on. There's something called MSDS sheets, material safety data sheets. These aren't provided with the pesticide when you purchase them, but they're something that can be found online. They're made for basically every single chemical product on the market, not just pesticides, but fertilizers, cleaning products, anything you can think of. And these material safety data sheets you can use in case of emergency. They have that information, that pertinent information that the fire department or the poison control center would use to really, either clean up a spill or to provide the assistance that you need if you are exposed to these things. You got to follow the instructions. If you use too much pesticide, you can burn your plants. You can cause harm to the environment or yourself. It can kill off beneficial insects or spread to non-target insects, birds, ladybugs, honeybees, fish. These are things you want to keep protected. But if you use too little of the pesticide, you can be leaving a resistant population behind. So it's not like fertilizer as much, where you kind of make your own cocktail based on what you think the plant might need. It's really better to just follow the instructions. If I have any kind of infestation, I go with the heavier dose and see if I have any damage because of that, because of the spray. And if everything looks good, I stick with it. So there's chewing and sucking insects. Most of the insects that we have problems with indoors are sucking insects. But caterpillars, that's the big chewer that's outside. Caterpillars, those are coming from moths and butterflies. So if you can keep those out of your yard with some kind of screen, that's kind of nip it in the bud. But they are a chewing insect. Look for the telltale signs of their frass and chewed holes in the leaves. Personally, we use a BT product. I use the Safer Caterpillar Killer with BT, and I'm always looking for the active ingredient. So I look on the bottle first for that BT, because I know that's what gets the job done for me. And spinosad is also another option that you can use for caterpillar control. Spinosad is considered more of a broad-range insecticide, which can cause harm to non-target organisms if you're not careful, if you don't apply it properly, or if you apply it to areas that aren't needed. I have also found that spinosad is a little bit more effective on caterpillars in their adult stage, whereas BT is slightly more effective in its when the caterpillars are young and small. One thing you could do is alternate and use BT, and then maybe use spinosad the next week to kind of hit them from both angles, and that way you have better control that way. Fungus gnats, those are found outside and indoors. Usually they start coming around when you've been watering too much or your soil's too moist. That's always been the case for me. If you have that problem, it's actually not the gnats flying around that are causing the damage, it's their larvae in the soil. So that's something that a soil drench or a soil spray would be most effective with. We have a product called Go Gnats that works. Also azamax, neem oil, or SNS all have products that are capable of being used as a soil drench, and that will help clear up your fungus gnat problem. Another thing would be to reduce your watering. That's going back to sort of cultural control. Is you're in charge of this environment, and if you can make the best environment for them, it can help weed out those problems. So if you have any kind of mulch on your plants, it's good to remove that and reduce watering a little bit, and that will help dry out the surface of your soil and not leave them a good place to live. Aphids, they're a sucking insect that is usually just found outside. They're bigger than spider mites, spider mites. They have a piercing, sucking, something called a stylet, which pokes into the plant tissue, and then they suck out all the energy of the plant. Those I've seen all colors: yellow, green, black, brown. Definitely bigger than spider mites. They're really found in clumps. Not so much right on top of each other, but you'll find them often on new growth of your plants, rose bushes. I found a ton on my palm tree yesterday, and they were densely packed on there and basically crawling all over each other, just looking for a good place to eat. And I, rather than spraying my palm tree, because palm trees are pretty sensitive to a lot of different sprays, I wiped them off with a paper towel, and that really that got a big portion of the population. So I'll check again today when I get home. But another good way to keep aphids off your plants is to blast them with water. That stylet I was talking about, that piercing, sucking mouthpiece of theirs, is stuck in the plant when they're feeding. So if you blast them off with a stream of water, it will break that stylet off their head, and they'll die. They'll be knocked off the plant, and half their body's ripped off. So there'll be no more aphids. Another interesting thing about aphids is that they're born pregnant. So they have a really rapid reproductive cycle. It goes from a small population to quite a large population, in a matter of days. So it's something that you want to. Prevention is the key, and it's something that you want to scout out and find and take care of before you have too much of a problem. So related to aphids is you have ants. Now ants, like I was saying earlier, they can farm aphids for the sticky residue that comes out of the aphids to use for their own food. They also do this with mealybugs, which are kind of a white fuzzy bug, fuzzy insect that you'll find outside, oftentimes on cacti, but also I found recently on some of my tropical plants. So the ants, you want to keep them off your plants. You want to keep them out of your garden if possible. Tanglefoot, something we have that will keep them from crawling up some of your bigger shrubs and trees, like they're really popular used for citrus trees. And any kind of ant traps you can use, or ant poison. So got spider mites. Spider mites probably the biggest problem overall for everybody. They love dry, dusty conditions. They're tiny. They're real hard to see. They're usually like a creamy golden yellow color, but there's other colors as well. They love the dirty leaves. Perfect breeding ground. There's a dirty leaf for them, so you want to keep your leaves clean. So that goes back to even misting it with water, but more importantly, a preventative like azamax. Your foliar feeding schedule with fertilizer will help a little bit because you're moistening the leaves. If you're catching the undersides especially, that will help keep the leaves clean. Prevention really is the key with the spider mites. Once you have an infestation, it's really, really hard to get them taken care of. I do either use neem oil or azamax as a prevention and as a way of dealing with spider mites through vegetative and early flower stages of plant growth. But if I have flowers or fruits on my plants that I don't want to contaminate, if I don't want to expose to pesticides, I'll use something more gentle. There's SNS. They make all kinds of organic pesticides that are really gentle to use on your plants. Most of them have essential oils like rosemary or citrus, geraniums, peppermint. Those are the kind of ingredients that are much more gentle on your plants and would leave a residue that would have much less half-life, as well as being much more safe to consume in the end. So SNS makes a great product, as well as liquid ladybug. Liquid ladybug, similar to SNS, peppermint, rosemary, really gentle. It has a nice smell to it. Certain pesticides have different smells that are off-putting oftentimes. Neem oil has an infamous garlicky smell that a lot of people don't enjoy. Azamax, not so much. It's more of an odorless, but something like liquid ladybug with more of a minty type of citrusy smell to it would be less less invasive to the taste of your final products.
I've been running that stuff for a couple of
Mighty
years.
Wash is something that we've been getting lots of rave reviews about, and that's a product that you could safely use on your plants further along, almost in your harvest. It's a product that has been activated almost through electricity, and there's other ingredients in there as well. They're not listed, but the people that use it, the people that ask about it, they rave about it. That seems to be the magic potion that people have found to really clean off your plants at the end, clean off any kind of webs that are there, and just clean off those spider mites and keep them off your products. If you really have a bad infestation at that point also, another thing that can be done is get out a shop vac, like a wet and dry shop vac, and literally vacuum your plants, vacuum off those spider mites and the webs too. And now, if you have if you're at a point where you have spider mites with webbing and everything, that's a heavy infestation. So that's definitely going to require a lot of different controls, and probably going to have to use more than a couple different products. It's best, ideally in a perfect world, one product would solve all your problems, but different products have different styles of modes of action is what they're called. And so one might affect the way that the insect eats, and the other one might affect the way that the insect molts or moves along in its life stages. So if you use one product over and over and over again, there's resistances that can build up. Okay, and you'll have you'll be breeding technically like a superpopulation of insects that are resistant. So that's why it's best to hit them from different angles. Maybe like with the BT 1 week and the spinosad the next week, or neem 1 week and the azamax the next week, or the liquid ladybug the next week. Hitting these things from different angles, you're more likely to have success in your control of your insect problems, and not develop any kind of resistance to that as well. So definitely important. Whiteflies, you'll find those outside. Got a big problem with whiteflies on hibiscus, a lot of tropical plants. They seem to enjoy that. Mostly I'm thinking because they like moist, shady conditions, so they get deep into the plant, breed pretty rapidly. You'll notice them oftentimes. You'll see a black sooty mold that they excrete